Hi everyone, my name is Kira Blackstock. Today we're going to be going over the research article, The Selective Power of Causality on Memory Errors, which is done by Jessica K. March and Sarah Kalkowski, which was done back in 2015. So the causal connections and memory errors, which is essentially just talking about the cause and effect relationships and how they influence memory. More specifically though, how they can both help and hurt our ability to remember information accurately. So can your memory trick you? Do we always remember things correctly? Can something, quote unquote, make sense but still be wrong? Have you ever been really sure that something happened in a certain way, but then you later found out that you're actually very wrong? I know this happens to me all the time. I can be a little overzealous with my memory, but mostly that's because our memory it's not like a recording. It's something our brain actively builds and reconstructs over time. And sometimes the way we connect information will actually change what we end up remembering. So what is this study even about? So the study, again by March and Kalkowski, looks at how causal relationships, which again, that means the cause and effect connections, affect our memory. So more specifically, they really wanted to know whether these connections help protect us from false information, or if they sometimes make memory errors even worse. So why does this matter? So it's important because we rely on our memory all of the time. For example, right now in school, conversations and work, our everyday life, even eyewitness testaments and statements in legal proceedings, our memory is very important. So research has shown that when information is connected through cause and effect relationships, people tend to remember it better. However, those same connections can sometimes lead to memory errors because they can link incorrect information with the real memories. So it kind of overlaps it there. So because of this, the researchers really wanted to find out, kind of explore whether these causal connections actually protect memory from misinformation, or again, if sometimes they make memory errors worse. So going into our method, how did they study this? So in the study, the researchers used 72 undergraduate students as their participants. So there wasn't really an age range given, as college students can range from all sorts of backgrounds, ages, races, all the above. So the participants were asked to read facts about a woman named Heather, who was described as a job candidate. So there were two groups. They split the 72 participants into two groups, and in one of those groups, the participants saw the facts connected using the cause and effect relationships. So for an example, they would read a fact that said she learned Spanish because her boyfriend is from Costa Rica. The other group saw the same facts but as separate, unrelated statements without that causal connection. So really how we were looking at this is how these participants in each group received information, either with the cause and effect or as separate statements and facts. So moving on into the study, after the participants read the information, the participants completed what was known as the filler task, and then they would move into what was called the misinformation phase. So in this misinformation phase, they were shown some of the original facts again, but some of them had been slightly changed or altered. So these changes were called lures, and they could either be plausible, meaning that they made sense with the original information, or implausible, meaning that it really didn't logically fit into the original storyline or the information that they received about Heather in the beginning. So then finally, participants completed memory tests, which included free recall, cued recall, and recognition tasks, where they had to identify the correct original information through these. So the results that they received from this study showed that the causal connections didn't improve memory overall, but they did affect how people responded to the false information that we just talked about in the misinformation phase. So those participants who learned information with the cause and effect were better at rejecting false, better at rejecting false information when it didn't make sense with the original story. So really the key takeaway, the key details, key findings is when the false information was believable, or again what this study would call plausible, the same participants are actually more likely to choose the incorrect answer. So in essence, basically, causal connections help people notice when something was obviously wrong, but they also made people more likely to believe false information if it seemed to fit the story, if it seemed plausible. So when people learned the information that had clear cause and effect connections, they were better at recognizing the correct information when the false information didn't logically fit the story or the original facts and information. So what does this really mean? So overall, the study shows that the researchers kind of explained that this is by saying that causal relationships help people remember the general meaning, the general idea, or the gist of information, rather than those fine and exact details. So because of that, if new information does somehow fit into the overall idea, people will most likely accept it as true, even if it's actually incorrect information. So causal connections can, yes, both protect our memory, but they can also increase certain types of memory errors. And then how does this connect back to our class connections? So the study really connects to what we learned back in our memory chapter, which was earlier this semester. So in our notes, we had talked about how memory goes through encoding, storage, retrieval, and how we don't always remember exact details perfectly. We also learned that making connections, like organizing or linking specific information, can help us remember things better. But the study shows that even those connections can also lead to mistakes. So for example, we talked about how people can remember the general meaning of information instead of the exact details. So because of that, if new information seems to match the original idea, people might believe it even if it's actually wrong. So this also connects to the misinformation effect, where misleading information can change what we remember. So overall, to wrap it up, the study really shows that the same processes that help memory, like making those connections, can also create and cause memory errors as well. So our final takeaway, we've made it to the end. The study really just shows that causal relationships can be helpful for organizing, understanding information, but they don't always make memory more accurate. So they help us reject information that clearly doesn't make sense, but they can also make us more likely to believe false information if it seems, again, plausible or believable. It shows that our memory is flexible, but that flexibility can sometimes lead to mistakes.